So I want to start by pointing out a couple of things that I think are a little bit ironic about Ash Wednesday. Right off the bat, Jesus says in the gospel, we are to wash our faces so that we can fast in secret, unlike those who perform their righteous deeds in order that people may see them. We hear that, and a couple minutes later, we all get ashes smeared on our heads, and we walk out into the world with a mark that says, we are fasting. Perhaps a less obvious irony about Ash Wednesday is just that so many people are here. I mean, I'm not sure whether everyone knows this, but Ash Wednesday is not a holy day of obligation. Now, we have several of those during the year, and often on those days we have room in this chapel to spread out a little. But on this day, when the church does not require us to be here, the place is packed. And I think maybe the reason has less to do with rules about whether we're supposed to be here, and more because there's just something about this day that seems to speak to so many of us. Now, personally, I believe Ash Wednesday is not so much a day of obligation as a day of invitation. Now, I believe God always is inviting us into relationship, but for some reason, that invitation just seems a little bit more loud today, easier to hear somehow. In spite of the fact that parking at the CSC is a nightmare on our best day, people still come in the middle of a week, in the middle of the semester, when the chances of finding a spot on our lot are lower than the chances of winning the Powerball. That is statistically true. And it tells me something special is going on, especially when we add that this year, Ash Wednesday falls at an extremely busy time. We've had Mardi Gras activities, obviously, but also there was Valentine's Day, President's Day, this guy's birthday. For our non-Christian brothers and sisters, the month of Ramadan is starting, and yesterday was the start of the Lunar New Year. Still, all of that activity does not seem to affect our ability to hear God's invitation to us. And the CSC isn't the only church in the world that has big numbers today. Many churches fill up. St. Paul probably was correct when he said in today's second reading, now is a very acceptable time. But I ask again, what is it about this day that's dedicated to fasting and repentance that invites so many people to be here? What is it that calls us to break free of our complacency and show up? Again, to show up when we're not required to, so that we can mark the start of Lent with a dirty forehead. I think maybe it's just easier to be aware of God's invitation today. It's just naturally a time of year to take inventory and to think about spring cleaning, especially when it's 70 degrees outside. And the word Lent, after all, as you know, is a shortened form of the Old English word Lenten, which means spring season. In fact, sometimes I like to think of Lent as sort of a Christian spring training. Now, baseball players in Florida and in Arizona are getting into playing shape, and we Catholic Christians need to train from time to time too. But the idea isn't only to train a little or to temporarily stop some random activity. Lent can be a reset, a time to really start again. As the prophet Joel says in today's first reading, it can be a time to return to God with our whole heart. So what are you going to do during Lent? If you haven't decided, let me tell you what Pope Leo has suggested. He wrote, I would like to invite you to a very practical and frequently unappreciated form of abstinence, that of refraining from words that offend and hurt our neighbor. Let us begin by disarming our language, avoiding harsh words and rash judgment, refraining from slander and speaking ill of those who are not present and cannot defend themselves. To me, that does not sound exactly like, giving up M&Ms. And I also don't think that the Holy Father is suggesting that we stop calling each other names until Easter so that then we can go back to it. I believe the invitation we're responding to at the start of this Lent is about honestly looking at ourselves, discerning where we might need to make some changes, and then making them. And to continue with the spring training metaphor, I think we need to remember that spring training games don't count. They're designed to help baseball players get ready for the games that do count. And although many of us may not realize it, I think maybe we're being called today to get ready for something real. In the case of our OCIA folks who will be receiving sacraments at the Easter Vigil, and in a group this size, there has to be one. The group is so big this year. I've seen a few of them here today. They're getting ready for baptism. They're getting ready for First Communion. They're getting ready for confirmation at the Easter Vigil. But for those of us who've been Catholic for a long time, this first day of Lent could provide an opportunity to think about what it is that we need to get ready for. Because I really don't think that we're here today because we want to train for 6 weeks and then go back to doing things the way we always have. Let me give you an example of what that might look like. When I was a kid, one of my neighbors used to give up smoking for Lent every year. For several years in a row, he would quit cigarettes on Ash Wednesday and then take them up again on Easter. Actually, that's not entirely true because we often were told in those days that Sundays didn't really count as part of Lent. So from what I've heard, this neighbor would avoid cigarettes from Monday through Saturday. He would smoke like a chimney on Sunday, and then he would stop again on Monday. Now, even as a little kid, and when I was a little kid in the world, people smoked in grocery stores and in movie theaters, on airplanes, in doctors' offices. But I remember thinking, what's the point of that? And as I've pondered why so many people are drawn here as Lent begins, I wonder whether many of us might be thinking only of the next 6 weeks. Perhaps we're focused on attempting to do some sort of spiritual gymnastics with the idea that we'll stop again once Easter rolls around. But how would it be if instead we focused on things that are a little less temporary and thought about what we really need to change? I think, for example, of those in recovery, people who are working the 12 steps. They approach recovery one day at a time, but I don't think they look forward to a day when they'll be done. You don't take on that practice temporarily. In the same way, I wonder whether Lent might serve all of us better if we were to engage in practices that can become part of our lives. If Lent is like spring training, then maybe we can practice what we hope will become a well-trained habit by the time we get to Easter. I think maybe our Lenten practices can point us to things that we want to keep doing, even after Easter has come and gone. So maybe this year our Lent could be about adopting 1 or 2 practices that might help us become better Christians forever. Maybe we focus on kindness, or justice, or service, or not speaking badly of others, as our Pope has suggested. Perhaps we focus on praying more regularly. After all, what's the point of stopping certain things if starting again is just built into the plan from the start? What's the point of giving up chocolate or getting up earlier to pray or going to daily Mass if it all ends on Easter Monday? But that's what a lot of us do, me included. So again, I go back to the question, what is it about this day, Ash Wednesday, that seems to call so many of us to this place? Perhaps taking that question to prayer might reveal a Lenten practice that could lead us in some new direction. Or maybe we're in a really good place right now, and what we need is a Lenten practice that can deepen what's already a very good relationship with God and with our neighbor. When I was younger, around the age that many of our students are right now, I took a bit of a vacation from my church. That's one reason I'm so inspired by our young people that you see in the pews around you. They make the effort to be here in this place at an age when I often chose not to show up. But our students do, and I find that very moving. During my vacation, there was one year on Ash Wednesday, I didn't go to church for ashes, but I did something important. Like that neighbor when I was a kid, I quit smoking for Lent. It didn't really feel very prayerful when I did it. I was crabby. In fact, my wife Ginny said I was such a jerk during that first week that she asked me to start smoking again. And you know, with the gift of hindsight, I now look back on that Lent as a big step toward where I stand right now. Still a long way from where God is calling me to be, but also a long way away from where I was at that time. Even while I was vacationing from faith, I still seemed to hear that faint invitation, and I responded. On that Ash Wednesday, all I knew was that I was using that old Catholic habit of giving up something for Lent to try to help myself get healthier. But as I look back now, I'm pretty sure I also was responding to a bigger invitation. And I suspect the same thing can be true for many who felt the need to be here this evening. God is always inviting. Sometimes we respond, sometimes we ignore the invitation, sometimes we just pretend we didn't hear it. But I really do think that part of what happens on Ash Wednesday is that many of us are able to tune in just a little bit more closely than we can on other days. And wouldn't it be great if we could decide on a Lenten practice that would allow us to remain tuned in? My prayer is that many of us might respond to God's invitation by using these next 6 weeks the way that ball players use spring training, using our practice now to prepare for the games when they actually count. We're all being invited into something new this Lent. That's one reason why we came here today. It wasn't just to get our heads smeared with ashes. Maybe we're being invited to let go of some of what keeps us from God, or maybe God is inviting us to embrace something that will draw us even closer. Whatever the specifics, we're all being invited to something. And as the prophet Joel said in today's first reading, God wants us to rend our hearts, not our garments. Think about making changes that are not just superficial, not just exterior, and not just for a few weeks. I invite all of us today to try to listen to God's invitation and think about engaging in a practice this Lent that can move you toward God and keep you moving along that path even after Lent concludes.